Hello, I'm Davide Mengoli. Welcome to Salento with Love. I'm sitting on a dry stone wall built more than 700 years ago as part of a network of walls and fortified buildings protecting Salento from the attacks. Over 96 towers were built in Puglia, with 80 of them just in the Terra d'Otranto, where we are at the moment. What they were protecting? Who were the attackers? What was so precious that this land needed so much protection? Behind me, it's one of the towers protecting this part of the land with such an incredible history, a forgotten beauty standing there waiting to tell us a story. I'm going to transport you on a journey going back to the 14th century through the country lane and these stone walls, which they go back to 600-700 years ago. We have reached the Masseria. We're going to go into a building, a forgotten beauty that was built in the 14th century, full of little surprises. So if you come over and you decide to venture anywhere in the world, not just here in Salento, to a place that is a forgotten beauty, from a world traveler, just a little bit of advice. First of all, before you venture to a place like this, let somebody know that you're going to that place, what time you're getting there, what time you intend to get out. You never know, they're full of surprises. Also, always make sure to bring yourself some water. It really helps. It gets really, really hot here in Salento. A torch, a really good friend, just to have a look at the areas that no one else can see. And a little friend, just a little tool that can allow you to perhaps get out of trouble if you get into trouble. So, Masseria, fortified Masseria. Well, this particular one was built in the 14th century, right on the edge of the coastline, communicating with another tower right opposite, Torre Sant'Emiliano. Very close. Now, back in the 14th century, this area of Salento was really under the empire of the Spanish, all under the sacred empire of Rome, of course. And building a range of towers or a network of towers was extremely expensive. So they had a fantastic idea. They said that whoever had some money to spare, exactly 8,133 scudos in them days, could build a tower using their own finance, and in exchange they would receive a title. They would be the captain of the towers. Wow, that's fantastic. So they will receive this title, and in exchange the empire will have a network of towers protecting Salento. But what was Salento protecting against? Well, they were protecting from the Turkish, but what were they protecting? What was this land so special? Well, I keep saying it, this is a magic land. And just like everything that is magic, it needs to be protected. So they were protecting very wealthy families that belonged to the empire back in the 13th and 14th century. There was an incredible amount of wealth in Salento that can still be found in the buildings, in the architecture, hundreds of years later. So they were protecting from the pirates, they were protecting from the Ottoman Empire, which in the 1480 really, after putting the city of Otranto under siege for a period of time, they managed to break in. They were here for a short space of time, but they were a constant threat. And that's why these towers were built to protect Salento. Now, as I turn around before we go inside the Masseria and we see the tower, there is this church. Now, this was an add-on. It's outside the fortified perimeter of the Masseria. And this church was dedicated to Sant'Isidoro, and it was built in the end of the 17th century, like 1780. Very, very small. It's a tiny church, like a chapel. Not very much left. We can go inside and have a look. Yeah, I mean, probably interesting little details that you can see on the corner where the actual ceiling or the vaulted ceiling ends over there. Plaster has been removed, so potentially this chapel had frescoes and paintings, little things like the container of the holy water is no longer there, but that little shape there at the top tells us that there was obviously something there. And a lot of these places, they've been vandalized, and a lot of these items have been removed. Everything that's happened in every part of the world where this beautiful history was left and forgotten. And that's why, for me, forgotten beauty has got such an incredible meaning, because really they have been forgotten, but they're still here telling us something. And so when you look at areas like this, you could just imagine there was probably an icon in there, or a statue, a small altar probably in the back there that has been removed. So this was built at the end. So after the Turks' threat was over, after the Battle of Lepanto, really the structure of this fortified Masseria and the building of the towers terminated, because there was no need really to protect anymore from these attacks. So a little bit of softness was introduced in the architecture. A little bit of softness was introduced as well in some of the features. And obviously the fortified walls just disappeared. There was no need to protect anymore. And so this chapel came after. You could just imagine if the Turks arrived and would have found the Christian church, what it would have done. So potentially for that reason, a lot of the activities or religious activities were kept in crypt, underground, and in different places. So this building that we're going to see, I still haven't told you the name, so it's a really amazing one. This is probably one of the best examples of fortified Masseria and forgotten beauty here in Salento. Had a network. I mean, the engineering that went into the construction of this buildings was incredible. They had to protect from attack. Sometimes probably they had to be under siege for days or weeks. So they needed to think security, they needed to think safety, they needed to think about water, they needed to think about food, so many things. And all of those things went into the architecture elements. So when they were under attack, they could actually stand old and survive potentially for a long period of time. So first of all, here completely in an overgrown state and very dangerous to get close to. This I'm going to try to give you a little bit of a snippet. This is a cistern which is incredibly large, and I'm going to try not to fall into this. Very dangerous. And can you see it? That's a cistern with an incredible vaulted ceiling. It's incredibly large, containing thousands and hundreds of thousands of hectoliters of water. The water was collected from the roofs of the building. The water was collected from canals, stone canaled. Let me just see if I can get off this without getting totally, yeah, I'll have to watch it as well for some creatures, but it should be fine. Yeah, so water was collected from the area, very important water for their survival. And also they needed to think about animals, they needed to think about livestock. This was not just a military base back in the 14th century, but it was a masseria, a fortified masseria, one of the hundreds that you can find in Salento. So it was important for them to cultivate the land around. It was important for them to look after the livestock. So water was a key element. Right, so we've now arrived at the courtyard. We're just past the two major pillars. I would have thought that this was probably built later again, probably same time as the church. Before that, I'm sure the wall was there, and they really needed to have some strong gates holding back the Turks from coming in. Now, as I turn around, you're going to see one of the best examples, and that's why this masseria, this fortified masseria, is one of the best forgotten beauty examples of Salento. As I turn around, yes, you're going to see a drawbridge. That it's actually an amazing example of a drawbridge here in a masseria in Salento. That was built to protect the remaining people within this establishment from the attacks. So they could run upstairs, they could lock themselves up in the tower, and the tower was the most secured part of the building. We're going to go up there in a minute, and it's just absolutely amazing. It's like really going back in time. Different parts of the building were added on afterwards. The stables over here, and by the thickness of the wall, probably no more than I would say 2 feet, so 50 centimeters, about 60 centimeters, the thickness of the wall. That tells us immediately that this part of the building was added on afterwards. I know that you're getting distracted by the stairs at the back, but we're going to go up there in a minute. And what I would like to show you, a fantastic book printed in 1984 was gifted to me as a result of me doing these videos about Salento. Somebody got in contact with me and gave me a book which is a collectible item. The book is called Le Masserie Fortificate, the fortified Masseria. This book documents all the Masserias that have been built here in Salento, with specific emphasis to the fortified Masseria. Now, what's the difference? Well, the difference is that, like we said earlier, they were fortified until the Battle of Lepanto. After that, really, there was no really a threat anymore. So there was no need to build towers. There was no need to fortify Masseria. The Masseria was still being built because they needed to cultivate the land and sell the grain and look after the livestock. But they were not fortified anymore. So when you come across in Salento a fortified Masseria, then you know that you're looking at something extremely ancient. Now, this book is fantastic because it gives us a floor plan of the whole building. So that's the chapel there that we've just saw. This is the cistern that we just about managed to have a look. This building there has collapsed. It's not there anymore. So it was obviously there in 1984 when this was done. That's also collapsed, it's not there anymore. These are the stables that we just have on our side here. And we're just going to go around and look at the main part of the building, which is the ancient part of the building. And then we're going to go up on the tower. And it's beautiful to have these documents here that tells us so much history about how important these buildings were for the history of Salento and the legacy that they've left us now for us. So, let's go and have a look. First of all, I think it's important to understand that these buildings were not just built. So we're going to go through this to get inside the first part of the... So this area here, we have doors, but there's no roofs anymore. It's all gone. And it's interesting to see this little bridge connecting the original part of the Masseria built probably in the 13th, 14th century and the new part of the Masseria. As we step inside, magic. Well, what can we say? I think almost like a feeling of energy, you know, to think that these places, they were not just here to look after livestock and cultivating the land, but they were military bases, and they probably saw so many things happening, probably horrible things happening, and they needed to protect this land from the attacks. And so that, with that in mind, the architecture reflected as well the importance of protection. And so you just have to look at how big and wide this wall is. We're probably looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 feet. Now also, can you see these holes on the side? Look at that. 2 big holes. These were probably the hinges locking up the door that was actually closed behind the attack, so they could actually close themselves in here and wait, hopefully, for some support coming from the neighboring soldiers or from whatever. But it's amazing when you look at this too. It kind of gives you an idea. This was not to protect the livestock from going out. This was protecting from whoever wanted to come in to stay outside, and the thickness of the wall allowed them to get that sense of protection. Because can you imagine breaking down this wall? There is some animal feeders over here, so probably this was part of a stable, and the cobblestone floor reminds us really of a Roman road. If you ever seen the Appia Road in some areas, which is like the historic areas of the Appia Road, Well, you would find exactly this. This is a really hard rock stone, really thick, like a foot in thickness, and smooth over a period of hundreds and hundreds of years. Now, there is some hay in here as well. Looks like somebody's been in here. I've got a question for you. Do you think that this Masseria ever succumb to the Turkish? What do you think? The answer, unfortunately, is yes. About 10 years ago, yes, 10 years ago, not in the 14th century, Ferzan Ozpetek, a very well-known writer and film director, chose this Masseria for one of his films called Mine Vaganti. So it's incredible how this stronghold managed to keep the Turkish out for hundreds of years or for a very long time, and then a Turkish film director comes over and takes over this Masseria. Isn't that bad? No, it's fantastic actually, because he did such a great job reviving this space for a period of time while this Masseria became a film set. So I felt that was a really, really crazy thing that a Turkish director picks up this Masseria to produce a movie. Now we're stepping from one room to another. Again, even going from one room to another, the thickness of the wall stays the same. So if they managed to come in through there, the same thing happened over here. We've got the same kind of holes on the side of the walls, making us think that there was another huge hinge there holding this door together. Now we're stepping outside into the courtyard. As we're stepping outside, we've got this beautiful stairs there looking at us. We're going to go up there in a minute, don't worry. It's really one of those areas that it deserves a little bit of attention. As we're stepping inside this room, we've got pigeons. It's just flew out. Yeah. These places have become the house of pigeons, but also before they were housing a lot of pigeons. Now look at the size of that fireplace. You could step in here, and you could be inside a fireplace. And I'm sure back in the days, this was probably on majority of the time because they needed to heat up the place in the winter. They needed to cook food. So it was probably on majority of the time. And being very, very big, you can imagine people sitting around. And what's interesting when you get inside these old buildings is that you find these holes on the wall. There's 3 over there and 3 over there. And these holes on the walls, they're only on one half of the room normally. What that tells us is that they used to build mezzanines, but only for half of the space. So you can imagine with heat going up in the winter, they could stay up there in a much more comfortable space, and also a little bit safer. You know, if they were under attacks, they could potentially protect themselves a little bit more from being up there. They could probably escape from one of the window, or they could throw things from up there. But really, it was a comfort. So they could have the living space, open plan. So open plan was created by the Salentini back in the 13th century. Open plan, mezzanine, Salento, yes. So, but as we're going through this other wall, I think we learned something also interesting about the type of architecture. There was no cement, there was no sand and cement in them days. Well, there was sand, the natural sand, crushing of the stones. But that technique wasn't yet used in the 13th, 14th century. What they did have was soil, they had hay. So as you look through, you could see how they used to mix soil, they used to mix the hay, potentially they used to put other things inside, obviously water, and maybe other things that used to work as a glue, probably eggs, mixing it all together. And then this was working in keeping all these stones together. Now this wall here that we're looking at here was built in 13th century, 14th century. So 600-700 years later, it's still there. And if you look at the density of this soil, it's like a rock. So it's just like cement. A little bit like in Africa, they're still building huts today using the soil. So we're getting into this other beautiful room. I love how this mold has grown. Again, look, we have the 3 holes over here and the 3 holes over there. So again, this room here had a mezzanine. and also with 2 holes here in the wall. So they use the cavity, being really, really thick walls, to create shelving spaces, to create like a storage area where they could keep food and other items. I also love the idea that all these masseria had a garden. You think, they're in the countryside. What was the need of having a garden? Well, I think the need, still today, we have exactly the same need of landscaping and making something beautiful when it comes to nature. Well, at the moment, it's obviously completely overgrown, but beautiful to see how these places had a garden. And some of the fruit trees in there, like the fig trees, just in Salento, over 40 different species of fig trees can be found. It's interesting that probably some of those fig trees are ancient trees, and probably some of them have been lost over the last few hundred years. So special to think that these places, although they were under attack, they were doing all sorts of things to protect themselves, they had time to have a garden. As we're stepping outside again, I found this. Wow, I wonder what they are. Bear with me for a second. We're going to try to move this lead. Hopefully there is no animal coming out. Oh wow, that's amazing. Wow, this is okay. Well, listen to the echo. Hello? Is there any Turkish down there? Well, there's no Turkish down there. But incredible. This is one of the cisterns. Look, there is another one over there, just a few feet away. So this must have been connected to the main one, and probably using the different levels to push the water, and to a channeling system that was actually feeding the animals, but probably providing water to the rest of the building. That's incredible. Look at the shape. It's perfectly round. I don't know what it's made of. It looks like clay, and it looks perfectly round, like a bowl. Wow. And he's got like holes here on the side. Can you see that? One on both sides. So it probably had something, and the water was channeling through that hole, and then, yeah. Oh no, probably had something fitting in there so they could take the water out. I don't know, but it's amazing. I'll come back and seal that and close before I go away. Now the masseria has got a wall. Oops. It's got a wall going all the way around. There's a perimeter wall going all the way around. And if you look at the wall from the outside, it's got holes in it, almost like cannons probably were fitted in there at some later stage. I'm pretty certain that's what it was for. And that's the chapel that we've seen over there, so you get it into perspective. Now, if you come over and you bring your children with you here, what an amazing opportunity to relive those moments of living here in a masseria, imagine, and just being under siege. Sorry, I've just found something, so I'm gonna look at it later. It looks like a little ring, nothing special, but I'll look at it later. You never know. So, yeah. So can you imagine now? The alarms. Oh yes. Before we go up, can you look at? If you see, look on the corners of the tower. Tower is 15 meters high. On the corner of the tower, there were like some figures. They were like soldiers, but statues. So when they were coming, they thought that they were actually being looked at. They thought that they had guards, sentinels at the top, but they were not. There were false guards there on the corner of the tower. Very, very clever. So if you come here, can you imagine now saying the sound comes and the alarm is there. Mamma li Turchi! Oh my God, the Turkish are coming! Run! And everybody had to run to get inside the safest place, which was the tower. Oh, quickly run! And wow! Once they were in here, they were safe. They could just lock the doors. Look at the holes here. They could lock these massive doors, and they could be absolutely safe from everything that was happening outside. Now, you just have to look at this to understand this drawbridge. Look, it's extremely high. So very dangerous, no protection here on the side. If you ever come here, please be careful. It's a fantastic site to explore, but please, please, please be careful. But what an amazing opportunity to go back in time and understand really what was life here when they were under attack. So they will come up here. Now, what was the big protection about being up here? Couldn't the Turks come up here? Well, they could have. But there was a fireplace here. Can you see? What were they cooking? They were boiling oil. I was going to say chocolate, hot chocolate. I don't know why hot chocolate came, but no, it wasn't hot chocolate in them days. But maybe, I don't know, probably some chocolate came from over there. But no, they were actually boiling the oil. The oil was then transported, I'm not going to take you into the next room yet, upstairs to the roof, and the soldier could see when they were right outside. Look, next to the door they had 2 inspection holes. They could see, they're coming up the stairs now. They're coming up the stairs now. So what would they do? They would throw the oil through this, and the oil will come gushing down onto the soldiers, burning them. Oof, that was painful. So they were very, very safe up here. This was the only way they could actually have access to this building, to the tower. So that serviced as a way of hitting them with the oil. And the 2 inspection little holes here could see exactly when the soldiers were coming up and were approaching the door. No need to say that the view from up here now in the 21st century, where we're not protecting ourselves from the Turkish anymore, are just incredible. Are you ready? Are you ready? Yes. That's the sea. And probably a little bit too far to see the sea, but you can see the sea actually. But over there where my finger is pointing, just there, that's Torre Sant'Emiliano. That's a tower. That tower was in direct communication with this tower over here. So they were responsible for sending the alarm out, and then these towers were actually distributing the alarms to other masseria around, and people were hiding in crypts and underground, all sort of places, because when the Turks were coming, they were coming. Now, as we're stepping in this other room, I'd like to tell you about the fortress of Masada in Israel. Now, it's obviously an incredibly large fortress, but they were under siege for a huge amount of time. And Giuseppe Flavio, the historian, tells us that although there is not all the historians are in line with this, nothing behind me, no, because I'm going to show you something. Not all the historians are in agreement, but apparently when finally the Romans built this huge ramp to get to the top of the tower and smashed the walls down and got in, all the soldiers inside and over 900 people were dead. But they were not dead because they were sort of locked up under siege in this tower for months, years. No, apparently they committed suicide. So where was the food coming from? Were they going to a supermarket to get their food? Right, no. They were feeding on pigeons. And you know what? This is so clever. Because you come to this tower built in the 14th century, and it's interesting how some of those techniques, some of those things were brought over here. And as a turnaround, in the tower, we have a dove house. This is not a security box bank where you can keep your belongings. No, this is actually a dove house. And up here, we have a nest. So this was really a way of securing themselves a strong supply of food if they were under siege. The pigeon would come in because they always loved these places. They always wanted a place where they can nest. And in the nesting, they will put their eggs. So the soldiers could feed on the eggs, and they could feed as well on the pigeons. Clever. So, because in them days, there was no tin food. How do you stock up food? They were so clever, thinking of providing themselves a constant supply of food, fresh food, from the pigeons. So all they had to keep up here was potentially wood for burning the oil and providing the oil, water, and the food that was coming. And they could be here for a very, very long time. So this tower here must have seen a lot of things. In the 1480, the city of Otranto was under siege for a very long time and finally succumbed, the Turkish, because the Spanish were out on a war campaign. And when they came, the Turkish were not here for a long time. Well, anyway, they were removed. But they did quite a lot of damage. So you can imagine the importance of these towers back in the 14th, 13th century, being so close to the sea. They could see the threat coming. You can imagine the heart pounding when those boats were getting closer. Incredible. They had to really use all their techniques to protect themselves and protect the people of Salento. So beautiful to be part of this forgotten beauty and to still today, 500 years later, have these elements of architecture that are still enriching Salento so much. No wonder why everybody loves Salento so much. So I hope you've enjoyed the video. I hope you've enjoyed this forgotten beauty. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel for the next forgotten beauty. Put a comment if you like, or simply just say I like it. Thank you very much from Salento with love.